President Biden is looking to set the tone for how his presidency will be remembered. It comes as the New York Times is reporting new details about the efforts this summer among top Democrats like Senator Chuck Schumer urging President Biden to drop out of the 2024 race following that disastrous debate performance. Here's what then Senate Majority Leader Schumer told the president privately in July, according to the Times, quote, "If you run and you lose to Trump and we lose the Senate and we don't get back the House, that 50 years of amazing, beautiful work goes out the window," Mr. Schumer said. But worse, you go down in American history as one of the darkest figures. That's the end of that quote. Joining me now to discuss that, the panel that I have with me, Susan Page, Washington Bureau Chief at USA Today, Symone Sanders Townsend, former chief spokesperson for Vice President Harris and co-host of The Weekend on MSNBC, and Rob Bluey, president and executive editor of The Daily Signal. Thanks to all of you for being here. Susan, I want to start with you. First of all, what a revelation in the Times about the conversation that Leader Schumer had with President Biden. You were able to conduct one of really two exit interviews that President Biden gave. How did you find him, and did you feel as though he really harbors a frustration with those top Democrats who pushed him out?
Absolutely. I think he is dismayed that he got this pressure not only from Schumer, but also from Nancy Pelosi to pull out. He told me that he believes he could have won if he had stayed in the race. That is not the conventional wisdom among other Democrats, that he would have won. But he also said that he's not sure he had the vigor to serve 4 more years. And that is such a fundamental question if you're seeking a 4-year term.
It really is. And you were the first to get that quote from President Biden. And it was such a revelation. And Symone, there are reports that Vice President Harris is really hurt that he is publicly saying, yes, I could have won. Now, we should note, he's also said Vice President Harris could win and she should run again. What do you make of where their relationship is right now?
Well, first of all, I think that the president and the vice president still enjoy a very close relationship. Through this debacle of should he get out, should he stay in, it was the vice president that really was on an island of her own among senior Democrats in terms of standing by the president. Not even in private would she entertain conversation about, well, if he gets out, she would never talk about it. And I think that moment is really important to the president. But look, I mean, I understand if she is saying now, you know, I've seen the vice president. I did not ask her this question, so I have no news to break here. But look, I just think at the end of the day, Vice President Harris, I'm sure, feels like if she had more time, she could have done well, even better, she could have won. Maybe if there were some other things that were happening within her campaign apparatus. But I'm also sure the president feels like, look, all these people told me, to the quotes in the New York Times from Leader Schumer, if you get out, we will have a chance and we could win this. And then we still lost, the Democrats did. So it's kind of like, well, maybe I should have stayed. So hindsight is 2020. We will never know the what ifs.
It sure is. And I think that question, should he have gotten out sooner, will continue to be debated for years to come. Rob, let me turn to you and what we heard from President Biden this week. In his final farewell address, he warned of an autocracy taking over the United States, and it comes as President-elect Trump is preparing for his inauguration. He is going to be flanked by a lot of billionaires at the inauguration. What do you make of the warning from President Biden, and what's the reaction you're hearing?
Well, Kristen, it's been a surprise to me, as probably anyone else, that Donald Trump has been able to cultivate this relationship with some of these tech billionaires, including Mark Zuckerberg, most notably. Zuckerberg, of course, famously deplatformed Trump. And so you have a situation where I hope that the promises that they're making toward free speech and more open debate are actually carried out in practice. I think that some conservatives are still skeptical based on past experience. In terms of his criticism, I found it a little bit hollow in the respect that Joe Biden was the one whose administration was working with the social media companies, in some cases, to suppress conservatives. So, you know, there is that fact that I think might get in the way of his argument.
Symone, there's a reaction from some Democrats that's been a little biting as well. This was Sheldon Whitehouse, who said, quote, "That was a great speech. Had that speech launched the re-election campaign, we'd have won. Had that speech launched his presidency, we'd have saved America. Now we fight on." Talk to me about the reaction you're hearing inside Democratic circles. Do you wish he had said that sooner?
I I think two things. First of all, I'm glad that the president was very specific. I think that there are many people who are pining for him to meet the moment. They saw him welcome President Trump to the White House, literally taking photos standing outside the White House smiling. And many folks are like, well, you just said his presidency would be a threat to democracy, and here you are smiling. And so that moment from the president in his Oval Office address is him ensuring that the American people know he is not bright-eyed or bushy-tailed about this moment. I don't think that that particular message about oligarchs and whatnot is the thing that, I don't think that's necessarily authentic to Joe Biden. I think his restore the soul of the nation, middle class, those are the things that are authentic to him. And I actually think he might have done better in the race had he stayed focused on that piece and talked forward-looking and not about defending his record.
Susan, I don't know about you, but I was preparing to listen to a speech that was going to be a look back at his 50-plus years in public service. And when he said that, I was like, ooh, some fireworks here.
Not this.
What did you make of that?
Yeah, not the speech we expected. Not a laundry list of this is what I have done,
right,
and this is what I'm owed. It was a look at a warning. It was intentionally evocative of Dwight Eisenhower's warning about the military-industrial complex when he left office. So it was, and it was not an argument that he has effectively made before. This is injecting a fresh argument on his part as he leaves the door. I don't know if he would have fared differently if he had given this speech earlier. He would have fared better, I think, if he had been giving more speeches, more news conferences, more interviews to make his case on whatever it was he believed. I think if you look at his presidency, the failure to communicate clearly to Americans played a part in his defeat and in his exit before he wanted to go.
I agree with Susan. Lots of talk about the cognitive.
Both of you.
Where were the cognitive issues for the president? Because I didn't see them in the interview he did with Lawrence O'Donnell the other night. I didn't see it in the interview he did with Read It on the Pages with Susan. And I did not see that in his office address.
In his Lawrence O'Donnell interview, I mean, he admitted that he did not communicate effectively, particularly when it came to communicating about his legislative accomplishments. He said Democrats should have put up signs in these construction projects that articulated why they were actually
He said Democratic bridge, and I was like, oh, goodness. He said too much policy, not enough politics. Yeah. And I thought that was very poignant.
Well, speaking of someone who is good at branding, President-elect Trump set to be sworn into office on Monday. We learned the inauguration is going to be inside the first time since 1985 during President Reagan's second inauguration. Rob, talk to me about what you're going to be watching for, particularly in these first 100 days. We know he's set to sign a number of executive actions on Monday.
So first of all, I think the inauguration speech itself will be much more positive than the inauguration speech from 8 years ago. That's a signal that Trump's team has sent. In terms of day one actions, the border. I think you can expect to see a lot of work on that particular issue. And then secondly, I'm curious to see if he decides to impose any tariffs on day one or within the first week. But the most important thing that I think Trump needs to keep the pressure on is the Senate confirming his cabinet nominees. Those are the individuals who are going to carry out the policy. And so if he doesn't have those people in place, it's going to be more difficult for him to move quickly.
Symone, what are you going to be watching for?
Well, I'm actually going to be watching for what the folks in the states are doing. You know, there are Democratic governors and Democratic attorney generals that have already been telegraphing, particularly on this issue of deportations, how they are girding for what day one of a Trump administration might be. And so while we will be seeing the pomp and circumstance here in Washington, there will be real movement, I believe, in the states on this deportation force, if you will, that the president has promised.
Susan, obviously a lot from the cabinet picks to his agenda. What are going to be top of mind for you?
Let's watch what the reaction is he gets. You know, 8 years ago when he took office, huge resistance by Democrats, by corporate executives, by some foreign leaders. We're not seeing that this time. We're seeing an effort to accommodate, to cultivate favor with the president by all those actors, by Republican members of Congress, Democratic members of Congress, foreign leaders, corporate executives. This is a different world for Trump and a different opportunity for him in a second term, I think, than in his first.
Really seminal point, I think, as we prepare to watch the inauguration on Monday. Thanks to all of you, Susan, Symone, and Rob. Really appreciate it. Great conversation. We do